I have an opening question for you around religious inclusive practices. So if each of you could maybe talk a little bit about what data, employee feedback, or return on investment indicators have made and continue to make religious inclusion a priority for your organizations. I'm going to start with you, Miranda.
Sure, I'll start. So I'll say, and I've heard the word a few times, intentional, right? So at the Hartford, religious inclusion has been a part of our work, and we've been intentional about it since 2018. So that's not a long time, but since 2018 when I initially stepped into the work. What I'll say is at the beginning, it was important to approach this work as a strategy and not just a standalone something to do, right? So at that time we had all sorts of initiatives for different folks, but we weren't really talking about religion. In fact, I would argue, and it still might be this way a little bit today, taboo. So religion, politics is something that you really don't talk about in the workplace, yet we've heard time and time again this morning that is super important. It is a deeply held, something that's important to individuals, right? And so as I think about it, I was listening. I was doing my role. I was listening to employees in terms of what are we missing? Whose voices aren't being represented? How should I be thinking about this work, and how do I add value back into it? And so in listening to those groups, it helped me understand that was a missing piece and we needed to do some work around it, plain and simple. What I would offer is I started again by listening, and I had a group. We called it the Faith Working Group. It was comprised of different employees at the organization, different levels. And we really spent time just talking about their experiences in the workplace. So, what accommodations, as we've talked about, were missing? What did we need to do to make the organization feel more inclusive? I remember looking at policies. We had a policy that said some of our workspaces were prohibited to be used for religious purposes. And in my mind, what does that mean? Because that in and of itself is restricting. So worked on some policies, resources, things of that nature. What I'll say is, in listening to our employees, we've been doing the work for a long time. We've had a partnership with Tanenbaum for 8 years, and it's been a slow burn process. It hasn't been something that we just said overnight, this is what we're gonna work on. I have incrementally sort of done the work. October 7th really signified for us that the work was and continues to be important. Right? So when that happened, again, we started to think about what else do we need to do to make sure that all of our employees feel that sense of belonging in the workplace. And so that work really continued for us. And it says to us, it's ongoing, it is necessary. It is not a one-time sort of event, if you will. The return on investment for us is, if you ever see any type of literature or anyone speaking on the Hartford, we always talk about our differentiated culture. We talk a lot about that. And so I am proof sitting here saying that this is a part of how we strengthen that culture. When you make sure that you bring in, religion or other aspects that may be missing, that's an opportunity to further strengthen that culture. And it helps to really drive, what I'll say is, that greater trust in the organization. So when you talk about folks leaving, if people feel like they can be themselves in the workplace, that helps drive that sense of belonging. That helps people feel productive. That helps people feel like they want to stay, they don't leave the organization. It really does create that environment where folks are really truly able to invest in themselves. So to me, that's the return on investment. It's that retention of our employees.